Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to see how we can send the pipeline alerts to Microsoft Teams in Azure Data Factory. This is one of the most common use case in the real-time projects. In a big organization, there might be a huge number of pipelines which are used to do several data engineering stuff. To manually monitor these pipelines will be a huge task, like monitoring if the pipeline run is successful or if the pipeline run is failure. So most of the companies use Microsoft Teams for their everyday communication. So getting these pipeline alerts instantly to Microsoft Teams will be a huge time-saving thing for the data engineering and the operation team. So that's what we are going to do in this demo. So firstly, I have a Microsoft Teams channel created for this. As you can see here, we have a channel called General. So this is the channel that we are going to use to receive pipeline alerts from Azure Data Factory. So for doing this, the first step would be configuring a webhook connection to this general channel. In Microsoft Teams, there is an inbuilt connector called webhook, so we'll be using that webhook connection to send the alerts. So to configure that, what I'll do is, near to this channel name, there will be a 3 dots, which says more option. So let's click on that. After clicking that, you'll be seeing an option called connectors. Let's choose this option. In Microsoft Teams, there are various kinds of connectors available, and we can make use of these to do different things based on your requirements. As you can see here, there are a lot of different connectors available. In these connectors, I'm going to choose the first one, which is incoming webhook connector. So in the right side, you can see a button called configure. So I have already added this connector to Microsoft Teams. Otherwise, you'll be seeing an option called add, as same as the below ones. So you need to add the connectors first, and only after that we can configure this. Since I have already added, I have this configure option available here. So let's click on this button. After clicking that, the first thing that we need to do is to give a name for this webhook. So I'm going to give a name called ADF alerts. And after that we have your default image. If you want to use any different image, then you can change it using this upload button here. So basically the alerts will be kind of similar to like if someone messages us in the Microsoft Teams. So here we'll get an alert with the name ADF alerts with this default display picture. So you'll be seeing shortly how we will receive the alerts anyway. Okay, so we have given the basic details here. So let's click on this create button now. Okay, so now we have created this webhook in this channel. So here in the bottom, we'll be seeing an URL. Let's copy this URL first. So this is the webhook URL, which is the most important one for sending alerts to this channel. So after copying the URL, we can click on the done button here. And I'll click on this close button. So firstly, I'll paste the webhook URL that we have copied recently to this notepad. So as you can see here, we have a dummy alerts created automatically. The alerts came through to the general channel with the webhook name ADF alerts and the default display picture that we have configured while creating this webhook. So now the next step is we'll be using this webhook URL in the ADF pipelines to send the failure or success alerts to this Teams channel. Let's see how we can configure that. Okay, so I'm inside the Azure Data Factory now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new pipeline. So firstly, let's change the name of this pipeline. So I'm going to give a name called Teams Alerts. Okay, so after giving the name, what I'm going to do is, in the activity search bar, I'm going to type web. As you can see here, we have two activities. The first one is web and the second one is the webhook. We can use both of these two activities for the scenario that we are going to implement, which is sending the pipeline alerts to the Microsoft Teams. But I'm going to use the web activity. So let's drag and drop it here. So firstly, let's change the name of this web activity. So I'm going to give a name called Teams Alerts Webhook. Okay, so we have changed the name of the web activity now. So now let's click on this settings tab. Here the first option is the URL. So we need to paste the webhook URL that we copied earlier to this text box. Okay, so as you can see here, we are getting an error message here. So the reason for this is, we should not directly use any kind of sensitive information in the ADF. So whenever we are dealing with any sensitive values, we need to store that as a secret in the key vault. and you may need to refer the key vault secret in here instead. So for this demo purpose, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give the URL directly. Okay, so now we have given the URL details. The next thing is setting up the API method. So if you click on this drop-down, we have different API methods which can be used to send the web request. So since we are sending the web request to the Teams channel from ADF, I'm going to choose the post method here because post is mainly used to send the web request. Okay, so the next option is the most important one, which is body. So this is the actual message that will be sent to the Teams channel. So the main alert message should be configured in the body section. So firstly, what I'm going to do is, for testing purpose, I'm going to paste a simple JSON structure here. The body has just two elements, which are summary and text. So the summary holds a value called pipeline failure alert, which is kind of a title. And in the text element, I have given a value as webhook testing. Okay, so now we have configured everything here to test the alert message. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to run this pipeline to check if the message is properly sent to the Microsoft Teams channel or not. So for that, first I will click on this save button to save these changes. And now I'm going to click on this debug button to run this pipeline. Okay, the pipeline is currently running. Cool, the pipeline run is successful now. So what I'm going to do is, I'll go to the Microsoft Teams channel. And as you can see here, we have received a new alert with the message webhook testing that we have set up in the ADF pipeline. That's great. Okay, so now we have tested the webhook connection, which is all working fine without any issue. Now the most important part here is, let's see how we can use this webhook alerts in the real-time scenarios. So for that, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a new pipeline. So let's change the name. Let's give a name called fail pipeline. So we are going to configure this pipeline in a way that when we run this pipeline, it is always going to fail. So when this pipeline fails, we should get an alert in the Microsoft Teams channel. That's the task that we are going to perform with this pipeline. So for doing this, I'm going to create an activity called fail activity. So what this activity does is, every time when we run this pipeline, this activity is going to fail. So we are using this activity just to make the pipeline fail for our testing. So once this activity fails, we should be receiving an alert in the Microsoft Teams. So now in the fail activity, we need to specify two things. The first one is fail message. Here I'm going to give a message as pipeline failure. Okay, the next option we have here is the error code. We can specify any kind of error code based on your preference. So I'm going to specify the code as 1001. Okay, so now we have a pipeline which is going to fail every time. Now what I'm going to do is, in the other pipeline that we created, which is Teams alerts, I'm going to create two new parameters. The first one is pipeline name, and the second one is the message. So now we have two parameters created in this pipeline, which are pipeline name and message. So these two parameters will get the values from the other pipeline, which is from the fail pipeline. So for that, what I'm going to do is, firstly I will save all these new changes, and after saving the changes, I will go to this fail pipeline again. Inside this pipeline, we are going to create another activity, which is execute pipeline activity. So let's drag and drop this. So the main use of this execute pipeline activity is, using this, we can refer another pipeline to execute or run it from this pipeline itself. So for example, what I'll do is, firstly let's change the name for this execute pipeline activity to execute webhook activity. So as discussed before, this fail activity is always going to fail. So when this is failed, then we need to run this execute pipeline activity. In this execute pipeline activity, I'm going to invoke the Teams alerts pipeline that we created earlier. So now what will happen is, when we run this fail pipeline, the pipeline will fail and will invoke the Teams alerts pipeline. So since we attach the Teams alerts pipeline to this activity, we are seeing the two parameters that we created here. So we need to pass the values for these parameters from this fail pipeline. So firstly, for the pipeline name parameter, what value I'm going to pass here is, if I click on this add dynamic content button, and inside that I will click on this system variable and will choose the pipeline name, which will give us the name of the pipeline where this activity is created. So this is the inbuilt property of ADF. So the reason why I am adding this pipeline name here is, when we are receiving any pipeline alerts, we need to know from which pipeline we are getting this alert from. So that's the reason I'm getting the pipeline name here. So currently the alert that we are getting in the Microsoft Teams channel is not that meaningful, right? So we are just seeing the message as webhook testing, but we need to have more information here, like the pipeline name and the reason for the pipeline failure and other stuff. So that's the reason we are specifying the parameters here. Okay, so now in the message parameter, what value we are going to pass here is, we need to pass the failure message from the fail activity. So for that, I will click on this add dynamic content button, and here in the activity outputs tab, I will click the fail activity and will add output.message. So in this way, we will be getting the error message from the fail activity and will be passed as a value to this message parameter. So now what will happen is, if we run this pipeline, the pipeline will fail due to the fail activity, and since this is failed, it will run this execute pipeline activity, and this execute pipeline activity will invoke the Teams alerts pipeline with two parameters called pipeline name and message. So these parameters will be passed to the Teams alerts pipeline, and we should get the alert with these failure details. So that's the main idea of this pipeline. So now we need to do one final step. So for that, I will go to this Teams alerts pipeline. Now we will receive these two values from the fail pipeline, and now we need to put these parameters into the body section of this web activity to display that in the alert message. So for doing that, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a new variable called message card. Okay, so now we have created the variable. So we will be passing this variable in the body section of this web activity. So for that, I will first remove the JSON structure that we used for the testing purpose from the body section. And after that, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to pass the two parameters values to this variable. So for doing that, we need to create another activity called set variable. And let's attach the success of this activity to the web activity. So after that, we can change the name of the set variable activity to set message. So this variable is just used as a display card for our alerts. Now I will go to the settings tab, and in the name drop down, let's choose the variable name that we created earlier, which is message card. In the values section, I'm going to paste a set of code. So I will just open the code in the notepad. So don't worry about this. This is mainly used to beautify the way that we are receiving the alerts in the Teams channel. This is just a kind of markdown code that I copied from the Microsoft documentation. So basically the most important part in this code is just these two sections of codes. So we created two parameters. One is pipeline name and the other one is message. So we are just using these two parameters inside the variable section to display that better in the alert message. So that's the simple thing that we are trying to do now. So let's copy this code and I will paste that inside the variable value section. Okay, so the final step now is to refer this variable name inside the body section of the webhook activity. So I will click on this add dynamic content button, and here I will go to the variable section and I will choose our variable, which is message card. So now we created this variable as a string. So all the value inside this variable will also be in the string format. So we need to change this format to JSON structure for sending the alerts. So for that, what I will do is, I will just add JSON function in the beginning of this ADF expression. Now the value inside the variable will be converted to a JSON format and will be sent as an alert to the Teams channel. Okay, so now let's click on this OK button. Okay, so I have missed one final step here, which is adding the headers for this web activity. So I will just scroll down here, and in the header section, I will click on this new button. And in the header section, we need to pass the name and value. So the name of the header would be content type, and the value should be application/JSON. So since we are sending the request as a JSON format, we need to specify this header as part of this web request. Okay, so finally we have configured everything in this pipeline. So let's click on the save button here to save all the changes. So now let's go to the fail pipeline and try to run this to check the alert functionality. So let's click on this debug button now. Okay, so as you can see here, the first activity got failed and now it is running the execute pipeline activity. And this activity will now invoke the Teams alerts pipeline. Okay, so now the pipeline run is finished. So if I just go to the Microsoft Teams now, as you can see here, we have received an alert. So if you notice something, the alert looks pretty good now due to the code that we used in the variable section. And these two are the parameters that we created. The first one is pipeline name, which says fail pipeline. So if I jump back to the ADF, and you can see here the name of the fail pipeline is fail underscore pipeline, which is coming through correctly, and then we have the message parameters, which has the value called pipeline failure. So this message is coming from the fail activity. So if I jump back to the ADF, as you can see here, this value comes from the message section, which is pipeline failure. So these two parameters, which is pipeline name and message, is passed as a value to this variable section, which is specified in the code in these two lines of code. And this variable is then used in the body section of the web activity as a JSON structure, and that is what we are receiving as an alert in the Teams channel. So similar to how we are using an alert for the fail pipeline, we can also use the alerts when the pipeline run is successful. So if you want to receive an alert if the pipeline run is successful, then you can do that as well. So as mentioned before, this is an extremely useful functionality to get the pipeline run status immediately, which helps the team to save a lot of time instead of them doing the manual check like going to the monitor tab and check all the pipeline run details to identify if the pipeline run is success or failure. I think now you have an idea of how to send pipeline alerts to Microsoft Teams channel using Azure Data Factory. So that's it for today. So if you found this video useful, please give a like to this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching and see you on another great video. Until then, cheers. Bye.